Hi, everybody. Yeah, great job. Right now, there would be thunderous applause were we in a theater doing it live. So I hope you all are hearing that. And thank you all for sticking around and joining us. We've got a little talkback Q&A opportunity now. So if you do have any questions, please pop them over in the comments. Whether it's about ZAC EFRON, whether it's about the play, not the person. We can try, but we probably won't be able to answer them so well. Whether there's questions for the actors, questions about token theater and what we're up to. But as you all think of some questions, again, just pop them in the comments. And I want to introduce our director, Helen Leung. Hi, Helen.
Hi, hello.
As we wait for other questions to come in, I might come to you with the first question. That's cool. In case no one really noticed, we're doing a play over Zoom on YouTube and remotely from different time zones. As you sort of prepared to direct these scenes from ZAC EFRON, how did you start the process? With the first rehearsal, how do you sort of dive into getting to know these characters and tell the story?
Well, before the first rehearsal, I thought about maybe more from a cinematic perspective how this might look with Zoom, and David and Wai wrote something pretty specific to our time, and having it be on Zoom, and that really helped a lot to play a lot of the things that we played with. And then when we did the first rehearsal, just Telly and Wai were just amazing and willing to go with us through this 17-page script, this portion of the script, and just really talking through all the nuances of what the characters may be dealing with, what they may be feeling, what the relationship may be, and really talking through that. And so once we got that layer done, that really just helped everything else just fly. So it was pretty effortless and wonderful to work with them.
Thank you. And you had a very game team of actors in Wai and Telly. Telly, I might come to you with the next question. You're coming to us from New York, right?
I am in Midtown Manhattan. I'm about 2 blocks from Times Square. So yeah, hi Chicago friends.
I know that you're busy with so many projects right now, despite the fact that there's a pandemic. I think you and your peers in the New York artistic community have been doing a lot to stay creative. What's it been like out there, with the shutdown and everything, and what have you sort of observed with the community in terms of doing work?
Yeah, it's been I've actually been, yes, of course the pandemic is tragic and we've lost, too many lives to count. I mean, it's and what David was talking about, that statistic, it is a large number. 250,000, is a huge number, but that represents a human being and a person and the families that are connected to those people. So it's a wide-reaching number. But I've also been inspired by my community. I find that, first of all, you'll find no more generous people than theater people who are donating time and services to incredible organizations like Broadway Cares and Actors Fund that are really helping people out during a tough time. Local restaurants and Hell's Kitchen that are normally serving people pre-theater, they're offering free meals to actors, pay if you can, so there are things like that are really, really inspiring to me. And also, awesome. Since performing arts venues are shut down in New York and all over the country, we are all trying to create our own work. I was also very inspired by David sort of reimagining the play for COVID. You know what I mean? So the first draft of this did not involve COVID at all. But it's hard to not deal with that and deal with the complications and the complexities of that. So I'm yes, this is a difficult time, but also an inspiring time. I feel like we've all been tested, in the same way that you all as a company had to ask, should we still do this? I think every artist is asking that.
Thanks, Telly. Yeah, well said. A lot of love for Helen's hair, looking great in the comments. So this is a question, David. I'm coming to you. A question that's come up to me a little bit. But do you want to talk a little bit about the title? I think people noticed that ZAC EFRON wasn't actually here. But yeah, why the title ZAC EFRON, Dave?
I think he's here in spirit. Ultimately, I think it's funny because the whole play, and you guys could not, you might have, it was an introduction to, these two characters, and there's 108 more, there's 100 more pages to perform. Ultimately, as we were writing this, because it began, like I said, with just 3 people sitting in a restaurant, name 2 people who name a play that doesn't end in such tragedy that has an Asian cast or that's an Asian story. And and so Cheryl Hamada, who's our friend, she was like, you guys should write a story. And we're like, well, what would it be about? And we kind of left that conversation, and then ultimately Wai and I we started talking about Crazy Rich Asians, and we're like, oh my gosh, Crazy Rich Asians, look what it's done for us. It's like all of a sudden we're a thing in the dating world, and Wai was like, are you kidding? I don't think we're a thing. I'm like, so we were going back and forth with this ridiculous banter, and all of a sudden Cheryl just stopped us and she goes, that's your play. So we just started writing this thing, and honestly, it could have been anyone. It could have been Channing Tatum. It could have been, just name some sort of like ZAC EFRON-y person, right? The Chris's, the Pratts, the whatever, But I think it was as we were writing this, and it just kind of came out where ZAC EFRON just came up, and I just remember seeing a movie where someone mentioned ZAC EFRON, so it was just sort of in the back of my head. And ultimately, what the play deals with is this idea of identity, specifically Asian identity, and why is it that all of a sudden that's the ideal that we hold up to, and especially as Asian males, we don't look a thing like that, and yet we're striving to make that sort of the idol that we're chasing after. And ultimately, what is the self-hate that's involved when we idolize someone like ZAC EFRON? And there's really no, nothing against ZAC EFRON himself. It's ultimately what he represents for us in terms of the masculinity or the lack thereof. When we don't look like that, when we chase after that, what does that mean about who we are ultimately? And ZAC EFRON just happened to be, I wish there was some sort of like, oh, this is what he symbolizes. It just in the subconscious, he was just the one that we chose, And to be honest with you, that was a working title, and I was going to change the title, but then it was Wai who said, after I sent them out the first draft and I titled it ZAC EFRON, I said, the title will be changed. And he goes, no, that's the title. And I was sort of hesitant. We did our first reading of it at Dramatists here in Chicago, and just the title itself drew so much interest. So we ended up keeping it.
Thanks, Dave. Wai, I'm coming to you with a question. Oh, I also forgot to introduce our general manager, Alex Wu, is here. He's there on the sidebar. Wave, Alex. So if anyone has questions. Oh, and our communications director, Alka.
Hello.
Hi, Alka. We have a question for you, Wai. I'm going to put it to you from Morricone 1900. So without giving too much away, the question is, so by the end of the play, should we assume these 2 guys wind up together? Wai, you're the actor and the co-writer. Talk a little bit about maybe the journey that we would see in the full production without giving, too many spoilers away.
Just like tarot cards, you don't know what is coming, so you have to wait for the full production. We thought about like a concrete ending, but it just, I don't know, like it's a little bit loaded how we're gonna tailor the 2 people into the future. And the idea also kind of feel like what we have to go through of self-awareness through the journey is always an unending process, right? If they get together, if they don't get together, what will happen next? We all kind of see the journey. So I am not giving away how the ending will be, but it's just gonna be like a cliffhanger. If that makes sense.
Perfect answer. Let's see. Just checking the comments for the questions. Thanks you all for all the questions so far. Tanya White says, wonderful use of the platform. Thank you. Is there a full production in the works? In terms of kind of the future and next steps for Token Theater, Helen, I'm going to pitch it back to you. Helen was the director, and she's also one of our founding board members as well. So Helen, as we think about what's next for Token, I mean, what sort of are your hopes for our next steps?
My hopes for a token for next steps is we do more of these original plays that are written by the company. I mean, of course, I love the classics, but I really am excited about seeing characters that are written for us, about us. And I think at this time in our country, it's really important to share the nuances of other people's stories. I think that is what can help bridge the gap and hopefully provide understanding of what others are thinking. And then once we understand that, then come together and really create a different future. That's my hope.
Thanks. And Tanya, to the specific question of if will there be a full production of ZAC EFRON, I certainly hope so. Wai did a great job sort of teasing the rest of the play without giving too much away, but I have hopes that it sees a stage in a theater one of these days. Let's see.
I do have to interject a little bit.
Yes,
and say
please.
that I loved seeing. So we did a pre-read of all of this, and I was like, oh man, this would be great on stage. But being able to see this on StreamYard and being able to see it in a video is completely different. I loved the intro. I was trying to figure out what Wai was doing during the first part of it, and luckily I didn't do anything when it came to rehearsal. So being able to watch him pull up his pants, I was just like, you would not see that on stage at all. It was amazing.
Yeah, just well done all around. As Telly was talking about, and people are starting to get more creative with the restrictions that are placed on us in this weird time when we're trying to make art and tell stories. I think sometimes the restrictions of format can lead to even more creativity. So it's really interesting to see sort of when that's done. Let's see. A question from Chakra Happy: is the entire play 2 characters? Dave, I'm going to toss this one to you.
We actually tried to make it a 2-character play, but there's just too much going. I mean, there's so many layers with this, right? With family, with just the different issues that ultimately, because ultimately we wanted to make a comedy, and who knows if we succeeded. I was laughing, but that being said, so it ended up being. It'll be a multi-character play, but there'll be 4 actors in it ultimately. So.
Thanks. We have an interesting question that I think I'm going to maybe just do a round robin. Miranda, our amazing stage manager, is probably like, oh, great, I'm going to have to spotlight everyone's screens. But it's an interesting question from Teresa Rowe. So I'd like to know if you guys view the white guy or sort of a ZAC EFRON as the ideal, or if you ever did, if not now. And so, we have male identifying, female identifying people involved. And so I might just put that question to the group, is that sort of blonde haired, blue-eyed ideal sort of something that you ever found yourself envying, perhaps? I'm going to kind of go down the line, and it's a bit of a loaded question, so we don't have to get too deep into it, but it's a great question, Teresa. So I'm going to go from the bottom up here. So Alka, our communications director, I'm going to toss it to you.
It's hard to ignore that this is the sort of what is the norm and what is normative for all of us in our lives, just as people, and then also as artists. And so I think that holds true. There is there is the female version of the ZAC EFRON for sure, for all of us, and what is considered the ideal and what is considered beautiful, especially for those of us who maybe are darker skinned or even darker skinned. And then that becomes such an issue. And you've got a very intense culture, for example, of, skin bleaching and all kinds of things that we try to do to ourselves to straighten our hair. If it's natural, for example, it's curly. So yeah, I mean, it is pervasive, and it is, sometimes it can be really damaging if we don't find a way to love ourselves and understand that these are norms that are placed externally. These are not necessarily things that we must believe. It doesn't have to be true. So one of the things I loved about this play when David first sent it to me was just that very concept, that it was like, I'm challenging this, and I'm challenging it in real time, and bringing it to light in an actual dating scenario, which we don't see a lot of. There's a lot of sort of academic discussion in Asian communities, I think, and in South Asian communities, but we don't really see it in real time in our stories the way we want to tell them. So this was powerful to me.
Well said. David, to you.
You know, it's funny. The reader did an article for us very kindly. And one of the questions that the interview asked was, how do you identify as Asian American? And I was just like, what? And Erik, you were there. And I made Erik go first, not more because I had no idea how to answer that question. So I wanted him to go first so I could formulate my idea. But it was interesting because, like, I think what we ended up talking about was this idea of at least growing up for me in the suburbs of Chicago, my identity was always based on what I'm not. If that makes any sense, right? It's this idea of I'm not this, I'm not that, so how do I respond to it ultimately? Last year, there was an exhibition at Wrightwood 659, which is a sort of a performance, sort of like a museum space in Lincoln Park here in Chicago. And it's called the About Face Stonewall Revolt and New Queer Art. What it is it's basically queer artists coming together, and it's since Stonewall, and they looked at the history of art basically. What was fascinating was some of the things that I was looking at was so grotesque, and but what the artist was doing, and they do that on purpose. It was this idea of, so the majority culture identifies and labels us as grotesque. We're going to take those things that you guys consider grotesque, and we're going to turn it on its head and make it into art and make it beautiful. Because you guys are always going to see us as grotesque. And the only way we can rise above it is when we stop saying we agree with you that it is grotesque and say, no, no, no. The things you guys see as grotesque, we see as beautiful, ultimately. So I think that this whole idea of the ZAC EFRON concept is ultimately one person's journey, and we won't tell you who, but one person's journey in realizing that I am so into this ZAC EFRON character because I've always seen myself as the grotesque, and I'm not able to love, because how can I love when I see this thing as grotesque and allow anyone else to love this if I see this thing as grotesque? And so it's one character saying to the other person, you're not grotesque, you're not grotesque, you're good enough, you're good enough. And it's not until he realizes that he's able to actually love and be loved.
Thanks, David. Telly, same question to you.
Yeah, this is 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us, but also sort of a year that we as a society in our country and in our world have to reckon with white supremacy. And white supremacy as it's not just the neo-Nazis that are marching in the streets in Charlottesville, white supremacy as in like white is right, white is the best, white is supreme. And that is, white is the top, right? Or what we all aspire to. And then ZAC EFRON being the prettiest of the white people is like really what we aspire to. So like, whether we like it or not, that is in our DNA. As a kid who was born in 1980, like that's just it's in my parents' DNA. And sometimes I think about what if the course of history had changed? What if it wasn't white supremacy? What if it was Asian supremacy? What do you mean? What if China won World War II and we're dealing with, Asian supremacy nowadays? That's why I think Black Panther was so amazing, because there was a world that was like, oh, no, in our society, it's different. And so you went to, it was of course a made up world and a fantasy world, but the truth in it was that just happened to be the group of people that ended up being imperialists and colonizing and ended up being in the position of being supreme, that we all aspire to that. So I think so much of this place speaks on that. And so much of this year has sort of allowed us in a way to like stop and go, oh, this exists, whether we're conscious of it or not. This system exists, and we sort of have to like really reckon and deal with it. And I think, one of the ways we deal with that is by theater. Theater is the way we reckon with that. Theater is the way we answer those tough questions together, society. So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Telly. Alex.
Oh my gosh, like you guys have such like high voltage like thoughts and everything. I was just thinking like, yeah, I grew up in like the 90s where it was like Zach Morris and like all these guys who like dyed their hair. They were like dirty blondes, and they dyed their hair, they bleached their hair blonde. And I was just like, my parents brought me to the States because of the fact that they wanted me to be kind of white. And so I'm in that boat of like Zach Morris, and then to switch over to like High School Musical and ZAC EFRON and everything. And that was absolutely, that was the ideal when I was growing up, is like, you need to be like these white people. And so as we get older, as everyone's trying to like promote Asian Americans and like who we are and like the beautification of different cultures and everything, yeah, my mind is changing. And I feel like the culture in America is changing, that just accept yourself. You're never going to be Zac Efron. Zac Efron can't even be Zac Efron for 5 minutes. And so it's just like to have that mentality now is where everybody is. Like, change is a good thing. Like, you don't want to set a goal and then like leave it there for that's the whole point of like having like businesses and everything, having like a 5-year plan, because you're not going to go, oh, in 50 years, this is where we're going to be. And then just like stick to that plan, obviously. Right. So that's my take on it. I'm not going to go very heady into it.
No, I mean, Alex, that's great. Thank you. Great answer. Why? What do you think?
So I am not from America. I'm originally from Hong Kong. And no, I never thought Zac Efron was the ideal until I experienced the rejection that I get. I always thought that in Hong Kong, I'm like, you know what? I'm pretty cute.
You are
cute.
Right?
Very cute.
I'm the dog. And I'm desirable. And then when I came to America and I, dating apps, or even way back when, AOL, like the rejection that I get, no fat, no femme, no Asian on all the profile, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, am I that ugly? And then the idea, like all these pictures of like beautiful sculpted, Zac Efron, and you can see, everybody's kind of pairing up that way. And I kind of say, oh, I guess, but then can I ever be like that? I don't think so. And I don't want to be, because I don't know. It's too difficult for me to be Zac Efron. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, and not who you are, right? And not who I am, and totally. Helen, to you.
I was looking back and thinking, when I used to dream about the one, was it always a white face? And no, not necessarily. However, I would say that the standard of beauty that got defined in my head is a white standard of beauty. So cheekbones, height, muscles. And then I did do some study in Hong Kong during college, and I realized that is not the Asian standard of beauty. That in Asia, if you have cheekbones, you had the bad luck of not having enough food to eat. And if you were dark or tanned, you had the bad luck of having to work outdoors. So it's a different standard of beauty. And then it made me, your question just made me think, in some ways, having grown up in America, the standard of beauty infiltrated, even if it's not necessarily a white face that I think about when I dream, it still has defined what I now call intrinsically a standard of beauty. So that's something we should all check, or at least I should check myself.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Teresa, for that excellent question. And I will say that there's a lot of really fantastic questions coming through in the comments. Unfortunately, we won't have time to address all of them, but what this does sort of get me excited for is that there's some desire and appetite for these conversations that this play engenders. And so that's a really nice sort of validation for us as a company. So thank you all. I want to go to Wai about a question from Barbara Joyce. Why the tarot cards? And tell me how challenging it was to play a character so vastly different from yourself in your day-to-day life.
So are you saying that I'm not acting? Thank you. Why tarot card? It is, go back to that night at the Marriott. Me, David, and Cheryl, loves tarot card, and I do love tarot card. I have a YouTube channel for tarot. It's called On the Cusp Tarot. Thank you. Subscribe. Thank you. And then, and then, so I was doing a reading for Cheryl, and it's good. This is yes. It makes sense. And then David is like, I don't want to talk to the devil. And then Cheryl was like, you should get one. And then I think David was having some difficulties dating at that time. So we did a love reading, and it literally like wrote itself. And then Cheryl was like, this is the play. You should write this. And then I was like, okay, sure. And then David just went home the next day, and somehow it just clicked. And then the first 3-4 scene was up, and then sent it to me and Cheryl, and we were like, yes, let's keep on working on it. And then, through our lives differences, the experiences, his dating world and my dating world is so vastly different. And it just makes such a compelling story. So we're like, let's put it on paper. So that's that. And that's why the tarot cards. It's kind of like a third character, because we all, the tarot is the subconscious, right? So what we have subconsciously can project through the tarot card in the show. Let's put it that way.
I love that. Awesome. Great. We're almost at time, everybody, but I just want to say thank you one more time to everyone who participated in making this event happen. Thank you to everyone involved in the play, in the company. Thank you all for joining us tonight. As Alka so kindly reminded us in the YouTube comments, we do have one more live event this Saturday, also at 7:30. So please tell your friends, come back. It will be live again. And follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, on Twitter. Donate if you have the means and the interest, and we really appreciate everyone here. So thank you, and have a great evening. Good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.